Hey guys, in today's video we will tell the moving story of Ronan Calloway, a young boxer who went through near-death experiences and received shocking revelations about the future of humanity. This story will stir your emotions and bring deep reflections about life, the choices we make, and the mysteries beyond this world. Before we start, comment below which city you are watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our inspiring stories. Let's go. My name is Ronan Calloway, and I have a story to tell that goes beyond the boxing ring where I spent much of my life. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, following in the footsteps of my father, Patrick Calloway, who was also a boxer. Since I was little, my life has revolved around gloves, punching bags, and the never-give-up mentality. My father always said that in the ring you are alone, that success depends on your strength, endurance, and above all, the will to win. In my youth, I truly believed that was all that mattered. My goal was to be like him, to be the best. At 23, I was already a recognized fighter on the local Philadelphia circuits. I trained hard every day, perfecting my technique and increasing my resistance. I lived and breathed boxing. Every punch, every dodge, every drop of sweat shed in training brought me closer to my dream of becoming world champion. But life has a funny way of changing our plans, of making us see beyond what we are used to. And it was during a seemingly ordinary training session that my life took a completely unexpected turn, taking me on a journey that would forever change the way I saw the world, life, and death. It was a Tuesday like any other. I had arrived at the gym early, eager to start my workout. The familiar smell of sweat and leather filled the air, mixed with the rhythmic sound of punching bags being hit. I felt at the top of my game, confident and strong. After warming up, I started training with a sparring partner. In the first few rounds, I was dominating the fight, my reflexes sharp and my strikes precise. In a matter of seconds, I managed to knock my opponent down with a well-placed left hook. Pride filled my chest as I watched him stagger to his feet. Satisfied with my performance, I turned to grab my water bottle. It was in that moment of distraction that everything changed. My opponent, frustrated with his defeat, lost control. Before I could react, he attacked me from behind, delivering a violent blow to the base of my skull. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. I felt as if lightning had passed through my body, starting at my neck and spreading quickly. My vision darkened and my head began to throb unbearably. My legs gave way, and in a matter of seconds I collapsed on the ring floor. I tried to get up, but my body wouldn't respond. Panic began to take over me when I realized I was losing feeling in my arms and legs. I heard distant screams, alarmed voices all around me. My trainer ran toward me, his face a mask of worry and fear. "Ronan! Ronan, can you hear me?" he shouted, but his voice seemed to come from far away. I tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come out. The pain was so intense I could barely think. I felt hands turning me onto my side, someone checking my vitals. Time seemed to drag by as I struggled to maintain consciousness. I heard someone shouting to call an ambulance. The world around me turned into a blur of confusing sounds and movements. The pain in my neck pulsed, and more I felt my body shutting down. When the ambulance finally arrived, I was already floating between consciousness and unconsciousness. The sirens sounded distant, as if they were coming from another world. I felt hands moving, tense voices discussing my condition. The ambulance's lights flickered, creating strange patterns in my blurred vision. During the drive to the hospital, my body felt like it was giving up. The pain began to give way to a frightening numbness. I knew something was very wrong, but I couldn't do anything about it. I heard the paramedics talking about my vital signs, about the possibility of spinal cord damage, but their voices seemed increasingly distant. At the hospital, I was rushed to the emergency room. Doctors and nurses moved quickly around me, hooking me up to machines, checking my reflexes. I've heard terms like neck trauma and spinal edema. The fever started to rise, and my body was shaking uncontrollably. As the doctors struggled to stabilize me, I felt my mind slipping further and further away. The pain, the fear, the voices around me, Everything started to fade away. And then, when I least expected it, something extraordinary happened. Something that would change my life forever. As my body lay in that hospital bed, fighting for life, my consciousness began an incredible journey. Suddenly, all the pain, all the fear, and all the confusion disappeared. It was as if a switch had been turned off, and I found myself enveloped by a deep, inexplicable peace. The transition was so smooth that at first I didn't even realize what was happening. One moment I was surrounded by the chaos of the emergency room. The next I found myself in a completely different place. It was as if I had been transported to another dimension, a place beyond human understanding. I saw myself floating in a vast, illuminated space. It wasn't a blinding light, but a soft, welcoming glow that seemed to come from all directions. There were no discernible walls, ceiling, or floor, just that light that extended infinitely. As I got used to this new environment, I started to notice subtle details. The air around me, if I can call it that, had an ethereal quality. It seemed to vibrate with pure, revitalizing energy. Every breath I took filled me with a vitality I had never experienced before. Then I realized something even more surprising. I was no longer in my physical body. I looked at my hands and saw that they were made of light, just like the rest of my being. There was no pain. There were no limitations. I felt light, free from any weight or earthly concerns. As I absorbed this new reality, I began to feel a presence. It wasn't something I could see with my eyes, but a deep feeling that I wasn't alone in that vast space. It was a loving, welcoming presence that enveloped me like a warm hug. It was then that I heard a voice. It wasn't a sound in the conventional sense, but more like a thought forming directly in my consciousness. The voice was gentle, filled with ancient wisdom and unconditional love. "Welcome, Ronan," said the voice. "Don't be afraid. You're safe here." I wanted to respond, ask questions, understand where I was and what was happening. But before I could form any coherent thoughts, I felt myself being guided. I was not moving in a physical sense, but my consciousness was being taken to another place within that vast space of light. In front of me, a scene began to form. It was as if the light was condensing, creating shapes and structures. Little by little, I recognized the outline of a rustic cabin. The walls were made of aged wood, exuding a feeling of welcome and simplicity. Inside the hut, there was a simple table in the center, and there, waiting for me, were two figures that emanated an aura of peace and love so intense that I felt immediately drawn to them. One of the figures was a man wearing a simple robe with a golden sash. His face was serene, his eyes full of compassion. Beside her, a golden-haired woman watched me with a gentle smile. She wore a blue dress of beauty and simplicity that left me speechless. As I watched them in wonder, the woman came over and touched my arm. At that moment, I felt a wave of love and understanding wash over me. No words were needed. I knew, deep down in my being, that I was in the presence of Jesus and an angelic being. And that's how my journey beyond life began. A journey that would show me profound truths about existence, love, and the purpose of life. An experience that would forever change my understanding of what it means to be alive and what awaits us beyond the veil of death. With a simple gesture from the golden-haired woman, the scenery around us began to change. The rustic cabin disappeared, giving way to a garden of indescribable beauty. It was as if we had been transported to a paradise beyond human imagination. The garden stretched as far as I could see, filled with vibrantly colored flowers that I had never seen on earth. Some seemed to emit their own light, gently pulsing in shades of blue, pink, and gold. The grass beneath my feet, although I didn't exactly have physical feet at the time, was bright green and felt almost soft to the touch. In the center of the garden, there was a majestic fountain. The water gushing out of it was like nothing I had ever seen. It was crystal clear, almost luminous, and seemed to sing a soft melody as it cascaded down. The sound was comforting and made me feel at peace. Huge, ancient trees stood here and there, their leaves rustling gently in a breeze that I couldn't feel but knew was there. Their trunks seemed to contain ancient stories, and I had the impression that if I paid attention, I could hear them. The air in this garden was different. Every breath I took filled me with revitalizing energy. It was as if the air itself was alive, charged with love and wisdom. I felt lighter, more alive than I had ever felt in my physical body. As we walked through the garden, I noticed small animals appearing and disappearing among the flowers and bushes. I saw rabbits with silver fur, birds of impossible colors, and even creatures I couldn't identify. Everyone seemed to emanate a peace and innocence that touched me deeply. The golden-haired woman guided me to an ornate stone bench situated under the shade of a leafy tree. We sat down and she started talking. His voice was like music, soft and melodious. "Ronan," she said, "this is a place of healing and reflection. Here you will have the opportunity to review your life and understand your greater purpose." As she spoke, I noticed the garden around us reacting. The flowers seemed to lean toward us, as if they were listening intently. The water in the fountain seemed to dance in sync with his words. Every choice you made, every action you took, had an impact not only on your life, but on the lives of those around you, she continued. Now, you will have the chance to see these impacts and understand the true power of love and compassion. With a gentle gesture, she pointed to the source. The water began to form images, like a film being projected. I saw scenes from my life unfolding before my eyes, moments I had forgotten, seemingly insignificant actions that had a profound impact. I saw myself as a child, helping a classmate who was being bullied. The gesture seemed small at the time, but now I could see how it changed the course of that boy's life, giving him the courage to face his fears. I also saw moments that I wasn't proud of, harsh words spoken in moments of anger, opportunities to help that I missed. Each scene was accompanied by a deep understanding of the impact my actions had. Tears of understanding and regret ran down my ethereal face as I watched this life review. The woman next to me comforted me with her loving presence, reminding me that she wasn't there to judge me but to help me learn and grow. "Remember, Ronan," she said softly, "every moment is an opportunity to choose love, to make a difference. Even mistakes are valuable lessons that help us evolve." As the scenes continued to unfold, I felt a shift within me, a deeper understanding of the purpose of life, of the interconnectedness of all things. I realized that every action, no matter how small, creates waves that spread throughout the universe, affecting everything and everyone. The garden around us seemed to pulse with this new understanding. The colors became more vibrant, the fountain music clearer. It was as if the entire room was celebrating my awakening to these greater truths. When the last scene faded into the water of the fountain, I felt transformed. The weight of regrets had been replaced by a renewed determination to live with more love and awareness. The golden-haired woman gracefully stood up from the stone bench and extended her hand to me. "Come, Ronan," she said with a warm smile. "There is more for you to see and experience." As soon as I touched his hand, the scenery around us started to change again. The heavenly garden dissolved into a soft mist, and when it dissipated, I found myself in a completely different place. It was an ancient city, with large Roman columns and ornate buildings that looked like something out of a history book. The streets were paved with smooth stones, and the air smelled of incense and spices. People dressed in togas and tunics walked past us, but they didn't seem to notice us. It was as if we were watching a moment frozen in time. "Where are we?" I asked, marveling at the scene before me. "This is a reflection of a time gone by," replied the woman, "a place where your deepest roots are anchored." She guided me through the city streets until we reached a large building with majestic columns. When we entered, I found myself in a large, elegant room. The ceiling was high and vaulted, decorated with intricate frescoes. But what caught my attention the most were the people inside. In the center of the room, standing and smiling at me, were my great-grandparents. I had never met them in life, but somehow I knew exactly who they were. My great-grandmother, Eleonora, had the same piercing blue eyes as my father. My great-grandfather, Giuseppe, had the same strong chin that I saw every morning in the mirror. They came over and hugged me as if we had spent eternity together. Their embrace was warm, filled with a love that transcended time and space. Tears streamed down my face as I absorbed the feeling of being connected to my lineage in such a deep and tangible way. "Welcome, Ronan," said Eleonora, her voice full of affection. "We are so proud of you." Giuseppe placed his hand on my shoulder, his touch firm and comforting. "You carry our strength in your blood, my boy. But remember, true strength comes from the heart." They took me to an adjacent room filled with ornate chairs. Each chair seemed to represent a different generation of my family. Some were robust and simple, others were elegant and elaborate, but all exuded a sense of history and legacy. "This is your grandfather's chair," said Giuseppe, indicating a dark oak chair with intricate carvings. "Sit in it and feel the connection to your roots." Hesitantly, I sat down on the chair. The moment I did, I was flooded with a wave of memories and emotions. I saw flashes of my grandfather's life, his struggles, his joys, his dreams. I felt his love for his family, his determination in the face of adversity, his hope for a better future. The feeling was overwhelming. I had never felt so connected to my story, so aware of the legacy I carried. I realized that every decision I made in life not only affected me, but echoed through generations, both past and future. Eleonora knelt beside me, her eyes full of wisdom. "Ronan, you are the sum of us all. Our experiences, our lessons, our love, it all lives in you. But you are also unique, with the power to shape the future in your own way." Giuseppe added, "Always remember, my son, that true strength is not in the fists but in the heart. The love you cultivate, the compassion you show, these are the things that really matter." As I absorbed his words, I felt a shift within me. The tough boxer I always thought I was gave way to something deeper, more connected. I realized that my journey on Earth was about much more than winning titles or proving my physical strength. The golden-haired woman, who had remained silent throughout this entire encounter, spoke softly. "It's time for us to go, Ronan. There is more for you to see and learn." Reluctantly, I got up from the chair. I hugged my great-grandparents once again, feeling their love wrap around me like a warm blanket. As we walked away, I heard Eleonora's voice echo, "Take us with you, Ronan. We are always with you, in every beat of your heart." We left the hall, leaving behind the echo of past generations, but carrying with me a new understanding of my place in the great fabric of existence. Little did I know that the deepest revelations were yet to come. As we walked away from the ancestral hall, I felt a subtle shift in the air around me. The sense of peace and belonging I had experienced began to give way to a slight restlessness. The golden-haired woman must have noticed my agitation as she turned to me with a compassionate look. "Ronan," she said softly, "the time has come for you to return." My heart, or whatever it was in this ethereal form, sank at his words. "Return? But I can't stay. There's so much more to learn, to experience here." She smiled, her eyes shining with ancient wisdom. "Your journey on Earth is not yet complete, dear. You have an important purpose to fulfill." Before I could protest further, I felt a gentle force pulling me. The scenery around me began to dissipate, colors blending into a swirl of light. The last thing I saw was the woman's comforting smile before everything disappeared in a bright flash. Suddenly, I was flooded with sensations: pain, discomfort, the sound of machines beeping, the characteristic smell of a hospital. My eyes slowly opened, blinking against the bright light of the hospital room. The first thing I saw was my father, Patrick's face. He was sitting next to my bed, with deep circles under his eyes and a worried expression I had never seen before. But what surprised me most were the tears in her eyes. My father, the man who was always the image of strength and control, was crying. Silently, tears streamed down his face as he held my hand. "Dad," I managed to whisper, my voice hoarse. His eyes widened. "Ronan, son, you're awake." He leaned forward, squeezing my hand tighter. "We thought we lost you." I tried to sit up, but my body protested with pain. My father gently stopped me. "Calm down, son. You've been through a lot. The doctor said it was close." As he talked about what had happened, the blow, the swelling in my spinal cord, the days I spent unconscious, my mind was spinning. Memories of my experience flooded my consciousness. The heavenly garden, meeting my ancestors, the lessons I learned. It all felt so vivid, so real. "Dad," I interrupted, my voice shaking a little. I've seen things. I've experienced things I can't explain." My father looked at me curiously. For a moment I thought he was going to dismiss my words, chalk them up to the medications or the trauma. But then, to my surprise, he slowly nodded. "You know, son," he said, his voice low and thoughtful, "when your mother died, I thought I had lost everything. But that night I had a dream. Or maybe it wasn't a dream. I saw her so clearly when I see you now. She told me that she was fine, that she was at peace, and that I needed to be strong for you." Tears formed in my eyes. My father had never talked about my mother's death this way before. "What I mean, Ronan," he continued, "is that there's more to this world than we can see or touch. If you say you've seen things, that you've experienced something beyond, I believe you." At that moment, something changed between us. The barrier that had always existed, the unspoken expectation of toughness and stoicism, had crumbled. For the first time, I saw my father not just as the tough boxer or the demanding trainer, but as a man. Vulnerable, loving, human. In the days and weeks that followed, as I slowly recovered, I shared with my father everything I had experienced. I spoke about the heavenly garden, about meeting our ancestors, about the lessons of love and compassion I learned. To my surprise, my father not only listened, but opened up as well. He shared family stories I had never heard before, talked about his own fears and hopes. Our relationship, which had always been centered around boxing and discipline, blossomed into something deeper and more meaningful. As my body healed, I felt a transformation happening within me. The boxer focused only on victories and titles gave way to a more reflective man, more aware of the impact of his actions. I began to see boxing not just as a physical fight, but as a metaphor for life. The importance of resilience, discipline, but also compassion and respect. When I was finally released from the hospital, I knew I was no longer the same Ronan Calloway who had walked into that ring a few weeks ago. I carried with me not only the physical scars of the accident, but also the wisdom and love I had experienced beyond the veil of death. As my dad helped me into the car, ready to take me home, I knew this was just the beginning of a new journey. A journey of self-discovery, healing not just the body, but the soul. And for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to what the future held. The months following my near-death experience were ones of deep reflection and change. As my body slowly recovered, my mind and spirit underwent an even more significant transformation. At first, it was difficult to adjust to normal life after what I had experienced. The colors seemed more vivid, the sounds more intense. Every moment, every interaction, carried a weight and meaning that I had never noticed before. Sometimes I would find myself staring at a flower in the garden, marveling at its beauty and complexity, remembering the heavenly garden I had visited. My routine, which previously revolved exclusively around boxing, began to expand. I began practicing meditation, seeking to reconnect with that sense of peace I had experienced during my journey. I started reading voraciously, not just about boxing, but about philosophy, spirituality, and science. I wanted to better understand what had happened to me and how it fit into the grand scheme of things. One day, while visiting my grandfather in the nursing home where he lived, I realized something was wrong. He, who had always been a man full of life and stories, seemed like a shadow of himself. His eyes, once bright, were dull and distant. "What happened, Grandpa?" I asked, holding his wrinkled hand. He looked at me with deep sadness. Ah, Ronan, since the accident, since I lost the use of my legs, sometimes I think it's not worth continuing. His words hit me like a punch in the gut. I vividly remembered my grandfather's chair in the ancestral hall, the sense of connection and purpose I had felt there. At that moment, I knew what I needed to do. Carefully and patiently, I began to share my experience with my grandfather. I spoke about the heavenly garden, about meeting our ancestors, about the unconditional love I had felt. I described in detail the room with the chairs from past generations and how I had felt connected to our entire lineage. As I spoke, I saw a change in my grandfather's eyes. The sadness began to give way to a glow of interest, then hope. Did you really see all that, Ronan? He asked, his voice shaking a little. I nodded, shaking his hand. Yes, Grandpa. And you know what else? They are proud of us. Of you, your life, your struggles, your joys. All of this is part of a larger fabric. You are important, Grandpa. Your story, your presence here and now, it's important. Tears began to stream down my grandfather's wrinkled face. He pulled me into a tight hug, sobbing softly. Thank you, my boy. Thank you for reminding me of that. In the weeks that followed, I saw a remarkable change in my grandfather. He began to become more involved in nursing home activities, sharing his stories with other residents. The sparkle returned to his eyes, and with it, a new purpose. It was at that moment that I realized that my near-death experience wasn't just for me. It was something I could use to help others, to bring hope and comfort to those who were struggling with the big questions of life and death. I began visiting hospitals and nursing homes regularly, sharing my story with terminally ill patients and their families. It wasn't easy. I was often met with skepticism or even hostility. Some people just weren't ready to listen, but for those who were, I saw how my words could bring peace and acceptance. One of those people was Sarah, a 19-year-old who was battling terminal cancer. When I met her, she was filled with anger and fear, outraged by the injustice of her situation. Why me? She asked me one day, tears of frustration in her eyes. Why is this happening to me? I sat next to her bed and gently held her hand. Sarah, I began. I can't say I completely understand why things happen the way they do, but I can say that what awaits us beyond this life is so full of love and peace that it surpasses anything we can imagine here. I shared my experience with her, describing the heavenly garden, the feeling of being enveloped by unconditional love. I talked about the life review I had and how every act of kindness, no matter how small, had a profound impact. As I spoke, I saw Sarah's expression change. The anger in her eyes gave way to curiosity, then to a calm I had never seen in her before. You really believe that, don't you? She asked softly. I nodded. With all my heart, Sarah. It's not about believing, it's about knowing. In the days that followed, I saw a remarkable change in Sarah. She began to accept her situation not with resignation, but with a kind of serene peace. He began to value every moment he had with his family and friends, focusing on love and connections instead of fear and anger. When Sarah passed away a few weeks later, her mother reached out to me. With tears in her eyes, she thanked me. You gave my daughter the greatest gift possible, she said. Peace. These experiences made me realize that I had found a new purpose in life. Yes, I still loved boxing and continued training, but now I saw the sport in a different way. It was no longer about proving my strength or winning titles. It was about discipline, resilience, and the human body's ability to overcome challenges. Lessons that could be applied to all aspects of life. I started using my platform as a boxer to talk about my experience and the lessons I learned. I gave talks at schools, participated in radio programs, and even wrote a small book sharing my story. Not everyone believed me, of course. There were skeptics and detractors. Some accused me of inventing everything to gain fame or money. Others said I had suffered some kind of trauma-induced hallucination. But for every person who doubted, there were many others who found comfort and hope in my words. I received letters from people all over the country, and even other countries, thanking me for sharing my story. People who had lost loved ones, people who were facing their own battles with terminal illnesses, people who were simply searching for a deeper meaning in life. One day, I received an unexpected invitation. A group of scientists studying near-death experiences wanted to interview me and run some tests. At first, I was hesitant. I feared they would try to discredit my experience or reduce it to mere chemical reactions in the brain. But then I remembered the golden-haired woman's words. There is more to this world than we can see or touch. I decided to accept the invitation. If my experience could contribute in any way to the advancement of scientific knowledge about consciousness and death, then it was worth participating. The tests and interviews were intense and sometimes exhausting. The scientists asked detailed questions about every aspect of my experience, performed brain scans, and put me through a series of psychological tests. To my surprise, many of the scientists were more open than I expected. They weren't trying to prove that I was wrong or that I had imagined the whole thing. Instead, they were genuinely curious and eager to better understand what I had experienced. One of the neuroscientists, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, told me something that stuck with me. Ronan, we can't scientifically prove what you experienced, but what we can say is that experiences like yours are more common than people think, and that they often have a profound and lasting impact on people's lives. That in itself deserves to be studied and understood. Participating in this study made me realize that there was no conflict between science and spirituality. Both were ways of seeking the truth, of trying to understand the mysteries of the universe and human existence. As the months turned into years, I continued to split my time between boxing, volunteering, and sharing my story. My life had become a unique blend of physical activity, spiritual contemplation, and service to others. And although I couldn't predict the future, I knew I was on the right path. Each day brought new opportunities to learn, to grow, and to make a difference in the lives of others. And that, I realized, was the true purpose of life, no matter how long it lasted. Years have passed since my first near-death experience. My life had taken a turn I could never have imagined. The tough boxer that I was had transformed into a more compassionate man, more aware of the impact of his actions on the world. I continued to train and fight, but boxing was now just a part of my life, not its center. I began to see each fight as an opportunity to demonstrate resilience, discipline, and respect, values that I tried to convey to the young people I trained at my newly opened gym. It was one autumn afternoon, as I was driving home from a talk about my experience, that everything changed again. I was distracted, thinking about the questions that had been asked and the stories that people had shared with me after the talk. My cell phone rang, and without thinking, I picked it up to see who was calling. It was just a second of distraction, but it was enough. When I looked back at the road, I saw a truck coming from the opposite direction, invading my lane. I tried to dodge, but it was too late. The impact was devastating. Everything happened in slow motion. The sound of metal writhing, the shock of the airbag deploying, the feeling of being thrown violently against your seatbelt. And then, darkness. When I opened my eyes again, I was no longer in the car. I was back in that space of light that I knew so well. But this time it was different. The light seemed more intense, more alive, and I wasn't alone. 3 figures materialized before me. I immediately recognized the golden-haired woman from my first experience. Beside her, there were 2 other figures, a man with a silver beard and wise eyes, and a younger woman with a gentle smile and eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies. The golden-haired woman approached, her face a mixture of compassion and seriousness. "Ronan," she said, her voice echoing with a reverb I hadn't noticed before, "you have returned to us sooner than we expected." I felt a wave of confusion and fear wash over me. Did I die? The silver-bearded man took a step forward. "No, Ronan, but you're on the brink. The accident was serious, and your body is fighting to survive." The younger woman spoke then, her voice melodious and comforting. "We are here to guide you through another journey. There is more for you to see, more to learn." Before I could ask any more questions, the scenery around us began to change. We found ourselves in an immaculate white room. In the center of the room there was a round table with a surface that looked like water, but was solid to the touch. The golden-haired woman made a gesture and images began to form on the surface of the table. I saw scenes from the future, events that had not yet happened but seemed inevitable. Between October 18th and 21st, 2024, she said, her voice deep, significant events will occur, events that will change the course of human history. The images on the table showed scenes of natural disasters, political conflicts, and astonishing technological advances. I saw crowds in the streets, some in protest, others in celebration. I saw world leaders make announcements that seemed to shake the very foundations of society. Why am I seeing this? I asked, my voice shaking a little. The silver-bearded man replied, because you have a role to play, Ronan. Your work on Earth is not done. You will be needed during these changing times. The younger woman added, your experiences, your understanding of the interconnectedness of all things, will be crucial in the days to come. You will be a voice of balance and compassion amidst the chaos. I felt the weight of responsibility fall on my shoulders. It was an overwhelming feeling, but at the same time, I felt a determination rising within me. What should I do? I asked. The golden-haired woman smiled gently. Keep doing what you've been doing, Ronan. Share your story. Help people understand that there is more to existence than what we can see or touch. But most of all, be prepared. When the moment comes, you will know what to do. The three figures approached me, each placing a hand on my shoulders. I felt a surge of energy flow through me, invigorating and powerful. Remember, Ronan, said the man with the silver beard, you are not alone on this journey. We will always be with you, guiding and supporting. The younger woman added, and also remember that the future is not written in stone. The choices you and others make can shape the course of events. Use your knowledge wisely. I felt myself being pulled back, the light around me growing dimmer. The last words I heard were from the golden-haired woman. Go with love, Ronan, and remember, true strength comes from the heart. I opened my eyes again, this time to the blinding lights of an emergency room. Doctors and nurses moved quickly around me, their voices urgent but distant. I felt pain, a lot of pain, but also a renewed determination. I had returned once again, with a new purpose and a clear mission. The future was uncertain, but I was ready to face it, armed with the knowledge and understanding I had gained beyond the veil of death.